I was late again, of course, but I came anyway, because there's a kind of guilt that doesn't let you skip family dinners, even when you know how they'll go. My son clung to my hip as I knocked, balancing a pie in one hand and trying not to think about how many times I'd played this scene. My mother answered with that tight smile she saves just for me, the one that says, "We didn't expect you, but we'll pretend we did." I stepped into the smell of roasted turkey and store-bought laughter, already too aware of my place in it. Noelle was wearing the dress I gave her last Christmas, called it vintage now, spun once for effect, and pulled my son away from me without asking. She always does that, acts like she's saving me, as if motherhood were some affliction I caught early. The table was loud with easy chatter and half-insults passed like salt shakers, things like "how's your little side hustle" or "must be nice to work from bed." I took my usual seat at the corner, one chair removed from the center of things, just close enough to hear how much I don't belong. Dad sat at the head like always, cutting turkey with that aggressive focus he thinks passes for presents. My mom passed around her green beans, Noelle laughed too hard at something Uncle Ray said about crypto, and I caught myself folding and refolding my napkin. My son, bless him, was babbling about dinosaurs to anyone who would listen, which was mostly no one. I smiled, because that's what you do when you're not the favorite. Smile, nod, stay small enough to be forgotten, but polite enough to avoid giving them something real to critique. It was halfway through dinner when Dad put down his fork. That pause was too clean, too rehearsed. He said it casually, like it had just occurred to him. "Nobody here has time to babysit your kid, Elia," he said, looking not at me, but at his plate. "And nobody needs your money." The room stilled just enough for it to land. I didn't flinch, just let it settle, the way you do when it rains on a day you forgot your umbrella. Noelle nodded without looking up, a sip of wine on her lips like punctuation. No one defended me. Not even my mother, who once cried when I got my first client check, said she was proud of me, said I'd built something real. But now she just looked at her plate like it owed her something. Noelle was already talking again, filling the silence with another story about her apartment renovation, her new blender, how meditation had changed her life. My son asked for another roll, and I got up to get it, something in me already rearranging. That was the moment I started building the part they wouldn't get to see. There was no scene, no wine thrown across the table, no dramatic storm out, just the quiet rearranging of how much space I was willing to occupy in their lives. I watched Noelle help herself to a second slice of the pie I brought, called it decent for someone who never learned to bake like Mom, and I smiled again, but this time it didn't cost me anything. Because I knew something they didn't. While they had been busy performing family, I had been quietly becoming someone they'd no longer recognize when it finally mattered. That night, while my son slept in the car on the way home, I thought about how often I had waited for their praise, for some small nod that I was doing all right, that I'd made something of my life. But it never came, and it never would, because I wasn't meant to be their success story, I was just the example. The cautionary tale about what happens when you don't follow the plan. And that's when it clicked. They didn't see me because I'd outgrown the story they needed me to stay in. So I didn't cry. I didn't vent in voice notes or ask friends if I was overreacting. I just pulled into the driveway, carried my son inside, and opened my laptop. I looked at numbers they would never ask about, income streams, passive revenue, plans I'd been too modest to mention. And as I looked at everything I'd built without their applause, I started to understand that silence doesn't mean defeat. Sometimes, it's just the sound of someone getting ready. I tucked my son in, kissed his forehead, and whispered what I needed to hear. "We're okay. They just don't know it yet." The next morning, I got up before the sun, made my son breakfast, and answered a Slack message about a last-minute API fix like I wasn't still thinking about the way my dad said it. "Nobody needs your money." The words hadn't hurt exactly, but they clung, not like wounds, more like old wallpaper, peeling but familiar. My son asked if we were going back to Grandma's for leftovers, and I told him we'd make our own. I didn't say it to punish, just said it soft, like a new habit forming. He nodded and asked if we could use whipped cream. We went to the store, just the two of us, picked out cranberries, real ones, not the canned jelly my family always swore by. It felt like something tiny but rooted, reclaiming the shape of a tradition I could make my own. At the checkout, the cashier complimented my boy's curls, said he looked just like me, and for the first time in months, I didn't apologize for raising him alone. I didn't downplay the work or qualify it with humor. I just smiled and said thank you, and I meant it. That's when I felt something shift. Later that week, Noelle posted a picture with my son. A throwback, taken months ago at a birthday party I had planned, bought balloons for, paid for in full. The caption said Auntie Life with a little heart emoji and a line about how being an aunt is the best kind of motherhood. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, then checked the privacy settings. She hadn't tagged me, hadn't even asked. Just borrowed him for the illusion of connection. I didn't comment, didn't like it either. I just saved the photo for a folder I'd started that day. I called the family photo album we all shared, the one my mom checks every Sunday, opened it, hovered over the uploads I'd added since the beginning. There were birthday candles, first teeth, trips to the library, even his first scraped knee, with a bandage that had dinosaurs on it. I selected them all, every image that had come from my phone, and quietly removed them. Nothing loud, no message in the group chat, just a silent shift in access. They'd remember eventually, probably when it was too late to ask why. I just logged out, exhaled, and kept going. That same night, I got an email from Uncle Marcus, my mom's cousin, who manages the trust Grandma left behind. He said there was an investment property being reassigned, something about rebalancing equity. Said he'd been following my growth journey online, that he'd seen my company's name in some tech forums. He asked if I had time for a quick call that week. I reread the message twice before realizing it wasn't a courtesy. It was an invitation to be considered. For something they'd all assumed would go to Noelle, probably because she was the one who still showed up smiling. We talked the next day. I told him about my projects, the way I'd split income into short and long-term assets, how I'd automated a good portion of the back end to run itself. He was quiet, impressed in the way older men get when they realize you've built something they never learned how to explain. Said I was the responsible sibling, said those were his words, not mine. I thanked him, but gently. I didn't want to sound too eager. He told me he'd keep me updated and asked if I was planning to come to Christmas. I said I wasn't sure yet. That evening, I found my son's drawings scattered across the living room. He'd made a card for Auntie Noelle, said she was funny, said she helped him learn how to whistle. I didn't take that from him. I helped him glue the edges and let him tape it shut, told him we'd mail it tomorrow. Not everything has to be a correction. Some things you let stay soft, because your child deserves a version of love that doesn't carry your history. I let him put a sticker on the front, handed him the stamp, and watched him press it with so much care. After he went to bed, I opened my laptop again, this time not for work, but to look at the blueprint I'd been sketching for the past year, a real one. A wellness app for single parents, built on honest hours and flexible input, something real people could actually use. I'd been building it slowly, in the margins of my contract work, unsure if it would stick. But that night, I stared at the numbers and realized I could launch it by March. I didn't need their applause. I didn't even need their belief. Just the quiet knowing that I'd always been listening. By mid-December, Noelle posted another photo, this one with her new kitchen tiles, pale gray and marble patterned, same ones I'd bookmarked 6 months ago while researching for a client. She tagged a brand, used a hashtag for sponsored content, then thanked Dad in the comments for helping her find the right contractor. I stared at the caption, unsure what part of it made my stomach turn more, the performance of gratitude or the certainty that it would never be extended to me. I closed the app, turned my phone face down, and picked up the contract I'd been stalling on for weeks. It was a licensing deal, one that could let me build out my app under a larger firm's backend, technically giving up control, but expanding reach in ways I couldn't do alone. I had hesitated before, unsure if I wanted to attach my name to something I'd have to share, but now the offer looked less like a compromise and more like a key. Uncle Marcus called that same night, said the board was reviewing final allocations, and he'd quietly put my name forward for the property reassignment. Between us, he said, you're the one who's stable. I didn't correct him. He sent over the documents the next day, casually, as if passing along a recipe. The property was a 2-bedroom lakefront cottage outside Durham, and used since Grandma passed, but fully owned and primed for development. It came with a note in her handwriting tucked inside the folder, just one line, for the one who did the work, even when no one saw. I read it 3 times before folding it away, didn't cry, didn't celebrate. Just sat with it for a while, quiet in the way good things feel when they don't come with a spotlight, just space to breathe. I didn't tell anyone, not even Danny, who would have been the only one to cheer without turning it into a debate. Instead, I kept moving, bought a second winter coat for my son, rearranged our bookshelf, emailed back the license rep, and said I was ready. I signed everything that week, all the while thinking about how strange it is to get what you need once you've stopped asking for it. Uncle Marcus called again, told me the board approved the transfer. "You'll get the deed before New Year's," he said. "We'll keep it clean. No need for a family update." At the grocery store, Noelle passed me in the baking aisle, didn't see me at first, or maybe pretended not to. She was on the phone, complaining loudly about being overwhelmed, said she'd been doing everything alone lately. I didn't interrupt, just watched her walk past the flour, her cart full of things our mother used to call essentials: vanilla extract, butter, brand name pie crust. She turned the corner before I could say anything, and for a moment, I felt something that wasn't anger exactly, but a kind of sadness I didn't expect. A dull ache for the version of her I used to believe in. That night, while I worked on cleaning up the landing page for the app, a message came in from my dad. Short, direct. "Mom wants to know if you're bringing anything for Christmas." No apology, no acknowledgement, just the usual assumption that I'd fall in line. I typed a reply twice, deleted both versions, then wrote, "We'll be spending it at the cottage this year. Just the 2 of us." I didn't send it right away, stared at it for a full minute, then hit send and muted the chat. Sometimes dignity feels like silence, like choosing to be unreachable. A few hours later, I got a like on an old post from my mom's account, something from 2 years ago, me and my son at a pumpkin patch, him in a little orange hat. She hadn't commented, just tapped the heart and disappeared. I stared at the notification, felt the strange mix of closeness and distance that always came with her. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe just nostalgia. I didn't return the gesture. I just closed the app and walked to my son's room, stood at the door, watching him breathe, soft and steady under a blanket I'd quilted myself. Christmas morning came with quiet snow and a kettle full of cinnamon tea. My son opened his gifts slowly, like he wanted each moment to last, and I let him. I made pancakes, took a photo of the window view, and texted it to no one. After he fell asleep that night, I sat at the dining table of the cottage, light flickering against the wood grain, and wrote the first blog post I'd publish under my app's official name. It was called The Spaces We Build. I didn't mention family once. And still, somehow, they were in every line. By January, the group chat buzzed with talk of the new year, of Noelle's detox, of Dad's knee acting up again, of when we'd all finally be under one roof again. I didn't respond. I had unmuted the thread briefly to see what tone they'd take after my message, and as expected, it was breezy, practiced, like my absence had been written in well before I chose it. Someone mentioned planning a spring picnic, probably assuming I'd offer to host. I stared at the screen until the text went gray, then tapped leave conversation, just once, without flinching. My son had started calling the cottage our home, said it quietly at first, then louder, with the kind of certainty that builds its own foundation. He painted a picture at school, 2 stick figures on a blue porch, said one was him, the other was me, and handed it to me like a declaration. I pinned it above my desk next to a sticky note that read, "Launch February 20th. My first beta testers had signed up, mostly single moms from a private Facebook group, all of them tired, sharp, generous in the way women get when they're finally seen. I hadn't told him why we didn't see the family much anymore, hadn't made them villains in our house, just said we were making new traditions this year, ones we could carry ourselves. He asked if Noelle would visit the cottage one day, and I said maybe, kept my voice gentle, didn't let it bend. Some things I was learning don't need to be answered right away. Instead, I let him draw hearts on envelopes we mailed to the neighbors, baked shortbread cookies with too much vanilla, and taught him how to wrap books as gifts. It was enough. When the deed arrived officially, a thick envelope with my name on the front and a wax seal that cracked when I opened it, I sat with it for a long time, ran my thumb across the paper. Remembered the exact shade of my grandmother's nail polish when she used to open her letters by hand. Inside, there was one more note, and signed, just typed, "We passed down what we wish we'd had." I folded it twice, slid it into the old recipe box she gave me when I left home, and tucked the deed behind the cookie card. Noelle's next post came the same day, her face half-lit in a cafe mirror, captioned, "Some lessons come wrapped in silence." I didn't know if it was meant for me or for whoever she needed it to reach that day. I didn't comment, didn't text, didn't try to decode the meaning. People reveal themselves in how they respond to your boundary, and Noelle had spent a lifetime leaning on my patience like it was hers to borrow. Maybe she missed me. Maybe she didn't. Either way, I wasn't sending anything else for her to misunderstand. Uncle Marcus called in February, said the family had been asking questions, mostly about the house, about who got what, about how the numbers shook out. I thanked him for keeping me out of it, told him I was happy to let the silence hold what it needed to. He laughed, said, "It's funny who ends up being the one who holds the map," and I didn't ask him to explain. I just said thank you. Sometimes you take a win in pieces, not because you needed to prove anything, but because finally, someone gave you the room to breathe. At night, I found myself journaling more, not about grief, not about distance, just about what it meant to finally live without waiting for permission. I wrote about the lake and how it steamed at dawn, how my son liked to race the geese along the shoreline, how I stopped flinching every time my phone lit up. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with answers or fireworks, just stays close when everything else tries to pull you back. My mother hadn't called since Christmas. My father never followed up. I'd expected some small storm. Instead, there was weather, and we adjusted. The app launched quietly, just like I wanted, a soft rollout with testimonials that didn't try too hard, just spoke plainly about what worked, what held them through the long nights. I didn't lead with my face, didn't make it about me. I let the tool speak, let the design hold the people it was made for. One of the testers sent a message that said, "I didn't know how much I needed this until I opened it." I stared at the screen until my son called for more cereal. Sometimes, that's all the applause you need, someone saying they felt held. March brought rain and old habits. I got a forwarded message from Danny, apparently. Noelle had asked for my new address, said she wanted to send a little something for my birthday. I told Danny she could give it if she wanted to, but only if she felt like it wouldn't come with questions. She understood. Danny always did. The package arrived a week later, wrapped in gold, like we were still in the phase of our lives where glitter made things better. Inside was a framed quote. "Family is the compass that guides us." I didn't hang it up. Instead, I wrote a card back, plain paper, small handwriting. I said thank you, said the frame was lovely, said my son enjoyed the glitter, which was true. I didn't say anything else. I signed it from Elia, didn't add love, didn't add more than what felt fair. The card didn't ask for a response. It wasn't a test or a door. It was just a quiet thing you send when you don't want to be cruel, just clear. I dropped it in the mailbox and didn't check if she read it. That kind of tracking was behind me now. Spring warmed the cottage slowly, with light that reached the floorboards and woke the trees in stages. My son asked if we could plant something, said he wanted strawberries and sunflowers, said he wanted them to grow tall enough to touch the sky. I told him we'd try. We spent the next week digging into earth I hadn't touched before, soil still stiff from winter. There was something about making a mess outside, about giving your hands something clean to do, that made it feel like we were beginning again, this time without apology, without needing someone to clap for us. Uncle Marcus emailed me mid-April, said they'd finalized everything with the trust, said the estate was fully closed. He said Noelle had asked to contest something, but didn't follow through. He said Dad was quiet during the call. asked once about whether I'd be invited to the summer reunion. I asked him what he said, and he replied, "I told them you have your own table now." That sat with me longer than I expected, not as a victory, just a fact. Some tables you build because the ones you inherited never made room for who you became. The reunion came and went. I saw photos online, sun-drenched smiles, picnic benches, Noelle in another dress I might have liked once. My name wasn't tagged in anything, which made sense. I didn't feel excluded, just separate. My son asked if we'd be going, and I told him gently that our summer was going to look different this year. I showed him a map of a hiking trail nearby, and he lit up like I'd given him something expensive. Sometimes, all a child wants is your presence offered freely, not strained through obligation. He didn't ask again. He trusted the answer. On Mother's Day, I got a card from a woman who used my app. She said it helped her through nights she thought she'd lose herself. Said it gave her back her name. I read it twice, then tucked it into the same box where I'd kept Grandma's note, the one with the handwriting that still looked like home. I didn't post about it, didn't need to. Some recognitions don't belong on screens. They belong in rooms where your child is laughing down the hallway, where the kettle is starting to whistle, where you're still here and still choosing gently. That evening, I made 2 mugs of tea, sat on the porch, watched my son pretend to fly between the trees, his arms wide, his face tilted to the sky. I thought of all the ways I'd tried to prove my worth to people who needed me to stay small to feel big. Thought about how long it took me to understand that silence isn't emptiness, it's direction. And then I closed my eyes, let the breeze brush past, and said it to myself like a final chapter written in the smallest voice. This is enough. You are enough. Let them go. If this story found something true in you, something you've lived but couldn't name, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who's been the quiet one at the table, and subscribe to Letters to Ray Studio for more stories that speak where words often fail. Every story here is a letter, and if you're listening, then maybe this one was meant for you.